Hello, good morning. I'm so glad to see you all again. It's good to be with you. Welcome to week 2 of our Food Systems, Nutrition, and Health seminar. As you know, my name is Yona Sipos, and I'm your seminar instructor, which means that I get to bring in amazing, esteemed guests to actually fill in the seminar. The theme of this seminar is Future of Food Systems, and today we're going to welcome our first guest. Before we do that, before I get to introduce her to you, I'm going to run through just a couple of announcements, and then I'll turn it over. So this week, you will have your first opportunity to submit a half-page seminar summary. This is only relevant if you're in Nutrition 400. So the graduate students signed up for Nutrition 500 have a different assignment that's due at the end of the quarter. But Nutrition 400 students, as we discussed last week, have 8 opportunities starting this week to submit 5 total seminar summaries. All the details are on Canvas. The assignment is under Module Week 2. So I encourage you to check there, and then if you have questions, you can reach out, but it should be pretty straightforward. We want to know, what did you learn? And also, very importantly, what questions still remain for you? So we look forward to your seminar summaries, and at the end, we'll also look forward to your reflections on this seminar as a whole. Last week, we began with a Land, First Peoples, and Labor Acknowledgement, and I brought that to this class as a way to say a couple of things. One is to begin by acknowledging that the University of Washington sits on Coast Salish land, and including the waterways, but also just to open this up as a topic of awareness and ongoing dialogue. And today we're going to extend this dialogue. We're going to be facilitated in part through our wonderful first guest speaker. But I wanted to begin just by reminding everyone, as many of you already know, where we stand, where we sit, where we're living and learning and working, and so that we can move through this opportunity for dialogue and learning together. This is especially timely because yesterday was Indigenous Peoples Day, which is a way to honor and acknowledge both the history and the ongoing living, vibrant, current, present day of Indigenous peoples in the United States, and even beyond that, or in the land known in part as the United States. Indigenous Peoples Day is also a counterpoint to what has come to be understood as a celebration of colonization, Columbus Day. So there's a counterpoint here about who we acknowledge and how we acknowledge, and also for what purpose moving forward into the future together. I went to Suzzallo Library right before class, and I picked up something that I was going to mention to you all anyway, and that is a pamphlet for an Indigenous walking tour of our campus. So there's a great article that just came out about this new resource about really important places all around campus, and it was written by a recent graduate, Owen Oliver, in partnership and consultation with many people, including our guest, Polly Olsen, and it showcases many important places, as I mentioned, all around campus. So I encourage you to read the article. The link is posted in my slides, and also pick up one of these pamphlets and participate in this self-guided learning opportunity. This Wednesday, there's also the Distinguished Faculty Lecture that's happening in the evening at the Washable Intellectual House here on campus, and it features Dr. Charlotte Cote, who is a scholar at the University of Washington, an author, one of the people who helped to lead the development of Washable, or the Intellectual House. And this lecture is free and open to the university community, so please check it out either live on Wednesday evening or afterwards. I'm sure there'll be ongoing press about it. Also, just to lift up the University of Washington Farm, a student farm that works in close partnership with Washable, and that hosts many different types of learning opportunities and gardens, including a native garden that is really taking root and continuing to grow both on site and even across campus. And the annual Farm to Table dinner is back this year in person with very limited tickets. But if you're interested, please check it out. It's coming up in just a few weeks. With that, my announcements are out of the way. And I get to the most important part of my introductions today, which is to introduce our first guest speaker, Polly Olsen. And Polly has been part of the University of Washington for nearly 20 years, I learned, first through her work at the School of Medicine's Native American Center of Excellence and Indigenous Wellness Research Institute, and as an advisor to the Washabalt Project that I've mentioned. She is currently the Burke Museum's Tribal Liaison and has been in that role since 2017. And even though there have been partnerships and representation previously, Polly actually is the first ever tribal liaison full-time for the Burke Museum, which is, well, I'm glad that we are here. So we are hopefully going to hear a little bit more about that. It's important to note that Polly really arrived at a critical time when the museum was preparing to open this new facility. And so if you haven't had an opportunity to check out the new Burke Museum, it is open. It's amazing. I went there with my kids and my family a couple weeks ago, and I strongly encourage you to, after this talk, as one of the ways to continue your learning and engagement is to actually access that amazing resource. Polly is a leader in cultural diversity training, program development, education, health, and administration. Her understanding of bilateral learning between traditional and Western systems helps her both support the goals of an institution and the resiliency of tribal communities. I love this line that was said about you, Polly, that you engender respect for the diversity of Indigenous cultures and ways of knowing, and that you're always listening as you advance the Burke Museum's mission. And today, I am so thrilled that we have an opportunity to both listen and then participate in dialogue. Thank you so much, Polly, for coming. I just want to welcome you up here, and I'm going to move this slide over and put up a nice scene behind you. Thank you so much. Let's welcome Polly.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes? I am going to take my mask off. I already asked permission so you can see my face. Before we begin, I would like us all to straighten our backs. Let's get our spinal cord fluid moving and prepare ourselves for a day of conversation with Polly. So if you're with me, will you please take a breath with me, ground yourself, plant your feet, inhale, exhale. Welcome. Welcome to the food seminar today. I am going to engage in a conversation with you that I speak through my heart, and I speak through my lived experiences. As was shared, I am Polly Olsen. I am a member of Yakama Nation located in South Central Washington State. I do point because it connects me to home. I grew up on the reservation, and I have been here a part of the University of Washington since 1984 as a student and had different transitions and journeys in my life, but I'm a lifer. I am a true dog, which cracks me up. There was a time in my life when I didn't think that I was going to leave the res. And our elders encourage us to go and get our education. And so here I am. My mother was a middle school counselor, and she taught us and empowered us to be resilient in our culture. She taught us our dances, our songs. She brought sign language back to our community, and she created youth ambassadors to carry on our cultural traditions. And my father worked in the juvenile system, and he supported our the harm that juvenile systems do to marginalized communities, but he was also an advocate, uncle, and caretaker of our youth in that system and helped our young people re-enter into community. So I come from a strong lineage of education, youth advocacy, cultural resilience, and I am a non-traditional traditionalist. What does that mean? I walk in two worlds. Because of the history of American Indian communities, cultures from the early 1800s to present, the assimilation and the practices to remove our cultural knowledge, religion, languages, songs, dance, anything that was us, was forced to be removed from us. What knowledge was retained in my family was passed on to me, but a lot was lost. So I learn through conversations with elders, through books, through my own lived experiences and journeys. And today we're going to talk about that impact and what role and what work we are doing here at the University of Washington, but also how you can be colleagues, allies, collaborators, and respectful to the systems. You with me? Excellent. How many tribes are there? How many federally recognized tribes are there in the state of Washington? Take a guess. Anybody know? Throw it out. 19? 300? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes? Give me a number. 25. 9. Anybody upstairs? 37. How many of you are looking it up on Google? I'm kidding. We have 29 federally recognized tribes in the state of Washington. Each one of our tribes are different, with different languages, with different cultural practices, and different knowledge bases. Yet, we share some of those knowledge bases, experiences, and concepts with each other, but we're not homogeneous. We are different. I come from the Plateau region. And then we have the coastal region that have the waterways. We have waterways, we have rivers. In the United States, how many federally recognized tribes in the United States? Oh, you knew that one. I'm glad somebody knew. 574 today. 574 federally recognized tribes. Now, each of those tribes, all of the tribes, including our own, we have different governing systems. And we have a treaty system. I'm not going to go into all of this. I'll get to the foods, okay? But I want you to understand a basic concept, the basic political status of Indian country. 573 tribes, 29 federally recognized tribes in the state of Washington that have different governing systems, different cultural practices, different ways of living, and we are political. We sit in a government-to-government relationship with the federal government and the states that we reside in. Okay? So when you hear people talk about sovereignty or treaty rights, this is where it comes from, and it's very, very complicated. Okay? I can't go into that. That's not what this class is about. Your own research. Okay? But it's important for you to think about that as we move into food systems. Okay. Pause. I'm going to take you to the beginning of time. Another deep breath with me. I'm going to tell you a story that the elders share with us as young people, and a story that we tell each time we gather. I'm going to tell you the creation story of our food systems. A long time ago, before human beings came to this land, the animals, plants, fish, all of the other beings that were living on Turtle Island, on Mother Earth, were wandering around and living their lives. Spilei, coyote, we call him Spilei, was wandering through the lands having conversations with different groups. And he came upon the folks on the Columbia River. And he called a council together. And when he called all of these beings together, he said, relatives, there's this pitiful being coming. Very pitiful. They don't know how to take care of things. They don't know how to work with us. They don't know how to take care of things. And they are the human beings. And we need to be mindful that they are pitiful and do not have knowledge. And we need to take care of them. They're going to be hungry. They're going to need medicines. They're going to need shelter. And we need to teach them. So the councils, all of these beings sat together like us and had a long conversation. And they talked about what was needed and how to help these communities move forward. And so after 3 days, they broke up and they went into their own families, their own bands and communities to have the conversations. And Coyote said, come back in a day and we will make a decision. So everybody dispersed and they chatted and they had a conversation. The next day, Coyote called them back to the council, back to the Great Fire. And they sat down and he said, we've spent many days talking about this change that is coming, these human beings that will be joining us in this world. Who is going to take care of them? Who is going to offer themselves to take care of these human beings? So with that, Salmon stood up. And Salmon walked to the front and he said, I will offer myself to these human beings. They will harvest me at this time, at these seasons of the year. And these will be the protocols. This is the song that they will sing. This is the work that they need to do in order to harvest me. And this is how they will return me to the river so I can return the next year. Coyote said, thank you, brother. We accept your gift. We accept your request and the teachings that you are asking for. Salmon sat down. Elk and deer stood up and said, we will offer ourselves, and the hunters will go out and hunt us at this time, and this will be the practices that they will hold, and this is how they will return me to the earth so that I can return the next year. They sat and they murmured a little bit longer, and all of a sudden, the little roots raised their hands, the little sister roots. And there's a number of them, and they raised, and they scurried up to the top, and they said, Spilei, we will offer ourselves. They will be gathered in the spring when the first snow melts. We will offer ourselves to bring nourishment to these people. And these are the protocols that will be practiced. These are the songs. These are the dances. This is how we'll teach our young people to carry on this tradition. Spilei said, thank you for that offering, sisters. We accept your gift. They sat and they all chatted some more, and then all of a sudden there was this little being, my favorite medicine, little Wee-Wanu, Huckleberry. She said, I will close the season of harvest. I will offer myself, and here are the songs, here are the dances, here are the stories, here is the practice that the people will do in order to honor me. Here is the fire practice. Here are the ways to take care of me so I can return next year to feed the people. Spilei said, thank you. The rest of the relatives in the circle agreed to the offerings that were given by salmon, deer, the roots, and the huckleberries. So every year, when the plateau people get ready to harvest these foods, we come together and we still today practice these songs, these words, these stories. And we have a roll call for our elders, for our foods. And we cannot gather as a whole community until that first food ceremony is practiced. Today, as you know, these foods are hard to come by. Urbanization, climate change, depletion of resources, overfishing. I can go on and list many things that have happened. But the tribes are working on resiliency. Again, I just come back to what I said earlier about my mother teaching us resiliency, my father and our resiliency. Our relatives, our foods are resilient. I did not become a root digger until I was 40-something years old. Just aged myself, didn't I? But you don't know when that happened. When I did my root ceremony, my mom, I asked her to be my witness. And when I did this root ceremony, I actually practiced and did most of the work in the Longhouse. I did a cultural exchange with Heritage University, University of Washington, and Northwest Indian College. So our advisors, I was one of them, brought students in, and we did a cultural exchange. And we said we had to do this protocol right. So we had a food ceremony, a rites of passage to bring us in as root diggers. And I sat there and I thought about it, and I went, I didn't do this. So I asked my mom to be my witness. So I'm offering her my roots, and we had to do our root dance around the room to be seen by the community. And we did this at Heritage University. And we're holding hands, and she said, I didn't know you were interested. And I said to her, it wasn't offered. That's the harm of assimilation, but that's a resiliency within myself to take care of that rites of passage as a non-traditional traditionalist. Fighting and coming back to that knowledge, fighting within myself to come back to that way of living and to learn that practice and to honor it. It's a healing moment for my mother and I, because later when we unpacked that, she said, I was protecting you. I was protecting you from the mean elders and how harsh they can be in the teachings. Because I was older, I was able to handle the harshness, right? And I have a different relationship with them. So it helped us understand kind of that intergenerational trauma and the way that we pass that knowledge on, or the way that we withhold that knowledge from our young people or ourselves. And so we're all learning how to bring that out. Why am I telling you this today? I don't know. So I became the tribal liaison. I guess I'll jump forward to today. We have a camas meadow. Are you guys familiar? There's the paddles out front. We have a camas meadow outside. And all of the work, all of the designs for the Burke Museum had happened before I was hired. And as we came on, we started talking about how to get tribes involved. How can we get advice? How can they be involved? This didn't just happen here. This happens all over the place. Can you please invite the tribes in to come and bless the foods or bless the lands, bless this activity? And can we do something? And this is at the end of the project, right? The plants are being grown. They've been growing for 4 years. We're ready to move them to their new home. What can you do? And I'm in panic, and I'm moving fast, walking 2 worlds, right? So I get a hold of the local tribes and my food gatherers that I know that I feel would be really valuable to bring along. We go out to Oxbow and Oxbow Conservation Farm, And I said, can we just introduce ourselves to the plants? You guys do you, whatever that's calling to you. Can we introduce ourselves to the plants and let them know that they're coming to a new home? And this is going to be their permanent home, and this is going to be a home of education. So the elders that I work with said, we could do that. Okay. I'm moving fast, okay? And so I get these elders out there, we show up, and I feel joy. I feel great joy that I'm doing good work. And in that process, I noticed one of my elders who I deeply respect, she's Yakama, so she's like my tribal auntie, right? The Puyallups sing their songs, Snoqualmies tell a rabbit story, Suquamish tells another story, Yakamas sing a food song, but my elder, who I really respect and adore, starts moving out of the circle and away from me. Not me, but the work. And she starts wandering around the farm, and she really isolates herself. And I have to observe. I'm listening. I'm watching. So we do finish our work, and I go up, and it's, Auntie, you okay? What's going on? And she said, this is against our law, our religion. And I have a broken heart. I said, can you explain more? So I'm starting to personalize, okay? This is where I have to fight martyrdom in the work that I do, because I have to bridge two worlds. So my auntie said, these plants should not be in plastic containers. They are to be in the environment, in the place that they grow naturally. We do not propagate our foods. This is a gift. Do you remember my story I told you? The offering? You don't extract without asking permission. And I said, I'm sorry, Auntie, you are correct. Yes. Now, we've already started this work, okay? So the other teaching with my people is, with all of our native peoples, is if you start something, you got to finish it. Maybe that's across the board, across globally, right? If you start something, you've got to finish it, or it's going to just linger. So I apologized, and I went home, and I was sitting in this for months, because we still had a few months before we moved the plants. So I had to think about this, think about it. How, I'm a fixer, right? I always have to move fast and fix it. And I had to just sit with it. I went into consultation with several groups of people, with several elders. I also teach out at Monroe for education beyond bars, so incarcerated men. So I went out and I actually used this as a case study, talked to them. And they were so amazing as we had this conversation. They gave me the best advice ever. They said, Polly, you're talking to the wrong relatives. I said, what? I said, you're talking to the wrong relatives. You know who you need to talk to. And I gave them the stare down, right? Like, what? And then they just smiled at me. And I got it. I had to go back and talk to the camas. I had to go back and sit with the camas and ask them, what do I do? How do we repair this? And what is the message from them? So I sat with them. I listened to my friends out there, and I hope they're doing well, and I hope they feel my energy today. And I sat with the camas, and the message that I got in my reflection is, we offered ourselves as seed to be a part of this project. We agree that the law has changed, but this knowledge is being lost. And we are available to be educators, but we need somebody to speak for us. We need somebody to bring these teachings back. Yes, the urban landscapers did it wrong because they don't know us. Yes, we are in plastic containers, but we are coming to you to help you. We are your teachers. So I sat and I started to heal myself, which, as you can see, is a long process. and forgive myself for harming my elder, for harming the tribal communities, because I'm trying to bridge two organizations, two different theories, two different processes, and trying to get them to talk to each other. And we're not done. So the plants came, we planted them, they grew. We have a research project that's being started here to look at management styles for the camas meadow. Same thing happened. This individual got grant money, came to the Burke and said, we got grant money to manage the camas field, right? But they didn't consult with us or our tribal community, and we've already brought ceremony to this meadow. It's not just plants or an urban design. There's actual relationship that has been established. So we had to pause, stop, negotiate, collaborate, re-look at the design of the research project, re-look at the materials that were being used, from rebar posts to change that to maybe bamboo or willow, because these foods will eventually be harvested and feed people. I don't want metal in that food source. But I had another helper in this process, another teacher in this process. So we thought that we were going to be able to start this research project last year, right? Our first growth, to start really looking at it. But the lupin, I don't know if this was during COVID, so you guys weren't here. The lupin grew and were prehistoric. They were ginormous. They were as tall as me. And we let them go, and they started to go to seed, and then we started freaking out, both the grounds, the urban architecture firm, the research group, and myself and folks in the Burke who are helping me. We all started freaking out, going, what are we going to do? The lupin was to protect so that the camas could establish that this blocking sun, protecting from the rabbits, etc. So we decided to go in and cut it. And we cut them too late, so the lupin slowed us down again in this project. So now we're getting ready to get ready for winter, and we're starting to look at how to manage the lupin and how to fully become present to the camas as we begin our second season growth with our camas in the ground. These stories are important to your work as we are looking forward. I'm going to try to wrap this up so we can talk. Yep. As we move forward, when you're looking at food systems and when you're talking about the impact of what research or what design looks like as you move forward, or how you want to be the steward of climate change, the steward of change, you're coming in with good intention. But I think what I'm saying is we need to step back and look at who's not at the table in the conversations you are having, especially when it comes to the original stewards of the land that you are serving. Those elders, our Native American peoples, we have been here since time immemorial, and we have been stewarding this land in relationship since that time. We have asked permission, and we have gained permission from the plants, from the animals, to be in relationship with them, and we have to respect them. Now, we make mistakes. And I think that's the other part of this message. We make mistakes. We're humans. They knew we were going to make mistakes. We're pitiful. Right? We move too fast. So as long as we learn and we listen and observe through those processes and understand science is good and other listening makes better science, we are going to succeed, and we are going to heal the land. We are going to heal food systems. We are going to heal our bodies in this work. Ta-da. So now what we'd like to do is actually open the floor up for questions. And I hope you have some. Please talk to me. There's no dumb question. There is only knowledge to be gained. And I will answer through my own experience. I am a non-traditional traditionalist. I am a non-traditional academic, and I am here to serve you today. Questions? Yes.
I want to ask, like, you said that we need to step a little back and to like see our relationship with the food again. So, is there any like actual example of like what I should do, or like what are something to do, like satisfy this kind of concept?
The question is that I asked you to step back and look at what you're doing, and the question is, what recommendation would I have, or an example would I have that demonstrates stepping back? Well, one is, let's say you're creating you're all graduate students? No, some mixed. You're creating a project that you need to do, capstone, any kinds of projects, and you're working with your advisor. When I'm talking about this type of concept is step back and look at who your advisor is recommending and who's missing. And sometimes we don't know that. But for me, I would look and say, like at the Camas Meadow, I would say, who are the original stewards of the Camas? And it's all of the tribes of Washington State. Now, I can't get all the tribes, but I can get some. Or I can find food organizations that actually steward the revitalization of Camas use within tribal communities. Okay? It's a bit complicated. And it takes time to bring tribes in. The point about treaties is that we are always in litigation for other bigger issues. So our little asks, you will not get an immediate response. And so you have to keep finding different ways to get in because of the bigger problems and issues we're trying to address through so many different things. Okay? People will say to go to tribal council for support. I agree, and yet at times, especially with these smaller projects, sometimes it's better to just go to a department. Food sovereignty, traditional foods, cultural resources, Department of Natural Resources, fish and wildlife within a tribal community. Somebody in there can at least start a conversation with you and see if they're interested in working with you. Does that help? Yes and no. Yeah, I know. It's complicated.
Without an actual example of how we can.
Does anybody have an example that they can share? Do I have an example of how, basically it's how to do consultation when you're getting ready to do a project. I'm going to come back to you on that one, okay? Yes, please.
So, was it because they were in plastic containers? Like, do you think it would have been better when they used clay pots, or was it the fact that they were taken out without permission?
Well, see, that's a great question. Okay, so the question was the harm because they were in plastic containers, the camas and other plants? And the second part is, would it have been better if the plants were...
If they had been using clay pots, or was it because they were removed without permission?
See, and that's where I had to go sit with the camas, because they weren't removed without permission. There were gatherers that went out and collected the seeds. And so these plants were actually raised from seed. So the cultural conflict wasn't, I don't know, the cultural conflict came that she saw them in the plastic containers without knowing and hearing the story of how they got there, right? And so we had a cultural conflict. So I didn't do a good job sharing that the seeds offered themselves to the Burke for this project, or to the whomever did the collecting, because I didn't know that until after this conflict happened. So friend, maybe that's part of it, is when you discover that there's conflict and you're getting shut down, when people are starting to say no, that's when you really need to step back and go, what part of the story am I missing? And so when I figured out that, the seeds offered themselves, and I was able to move through it and come to a place to have a different conversation with her. That was still kind of way out there, but that is what happened. Because I didn't know the full story. And I think that's how come I can't answer it, because you get to a point, right? You don't know the story, so you need to look back at the process and see where the gap was. Did that make sense? Okay. Yes.
I'm someone who loves agriculture, grew up around reservations, and would love to be a part of indigenous communities thriving, but then also not wanting to perpetuate white savior energy. And specifically the Three Sisters way of farming, wanting to pull and add native knowledge and knowing to the research field.
Sure.
I guess I'm stumbling over my words because I don't know how to enter or engage in that relationship with respect.
And that gets complicated. So the question is, how do I enter community with respect to enhance research, inclusive of farming techniques, farming ways, and also be a partner with indigenous ways and food sovereignty practices? So I struggle with this one as well. And I think a lot of the harm that I hear and feel is the extraction, okay? Extraction of knowledge, extraction of foods, and then commercializing them and not giving anything back to the tribes whose religious practices, cultural practices, education practices is their way of life. I think about Montana and the commercial products of huckleberries, okay? And who's making these products? If it was the tribes, I will support those businesses because the money is going back to the tribes. But if it's not, it's harmful because it's extraction of our religious resources. Right? And people don't know that. And so, and there is and then there's the other part. There's knowledge that we need to keep for ourselves. I didn't go into the detail of the protocols in my story that I shared with you, but there's deep, strict protocols. And some knowledge is not for you. Maybe someday. So that knowledge wasn't for me, right? And I'm a Yakama woman. Right? Yeah.
I think that things go kind of bad when you only see things through a view that I would consider traditional scientific knowledge, and because it's not incorporating indigenous knowledge. So my question is, how can I expand or connect with that indigenous knowledge?
So you're talking the conflict between Western science and then including indigenous ways of knowledge into your conversation and into your professional practices as well as possible research. Is that correct? Okay. Patience. Slow and steady, baby. slow and steady. Western researchers are still very resistant to the conversations. I don't know if any of you have read Braiding Sweetgrass. I think you should. I think the one I read it, reread it, read it. I read it all the time. It has become kind of my, pocketbook. And just recently I read it, and one of the things that came up for me and I can actually retain is in the grammar of animacy in that chapter. They talk that Western science has language that only focuses on objects. The object, the mushroom, the cedar tree. But as she goes on, she talks about indigenous ways of knowing and the knowledge that we have by the sounds that we hear. We don't have a word that says, this is a mushroom. Our words, our scripting would be longer phrases in whatever's happening. And like she said, it's the pop of the spores in the mushroom. I can't say it right now. Anyways, that point is the elders will say that, and you know that it's time to go mushrooming, right? Because that mushroom, you can hear it, and you know I'm calling you. I'm saying I'm ready. It's time to come. How many of you chanterelle? I just went out and tried to chanterelle. They weren't ready. They weren't calling to me. Right after those big rains. But the salmon, so I'm geeking out. Pause, ground myself. I think it's the translation of knowledge. If you're, look at it, are you looking at the object, and are you trying to include uses? I mean, I'm speaking to you from an intellectual level, but I'm speaking to you from my heart and my lived experience. And I think that's an example of what you're asking. I'm speaking to the science, but I'm sharing the real, authentic life that I live and the experience that I have with science and with the foods. Right? We have 3 minutes. What do you want to do? You want to close?
Well, I feel like the questions are just coming out. There's so much to think about here. But I think it's time to close. So I'm going to come on up and help do that. Polly, I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing stories with us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your way of knowing, your experiences. When I first ran the seminar, then I had a bit of conflict, actually, that came up from students and other faculty around what is is everything that we bring into this class science, right? But science is a way of knowing, and there are many, many ways of knowing. Traditional ecological knowledge is a science that is based on millennia, since the beginning of time, on practice, on experience, but as Polly emphasized today, so importantly, on the relationships over time. That patience is really tough. So there's so much here that I just want to encourage you to walk out with today and just to hold and to let it percolate, right? And try to capture some of that and think about questions that you have. Write them down with your summary, and we'll share some of those with Polly so you can see what people are thinking about and what questions come up for you later. This sets the stage for us to talk about the future food systems that we can imagine. And this context, this complexity, and importantly, these relationships over time, these are the threads of our seminar going forward. So I just want to thank you so much. Please join me in thanking Polly. And I look forward to ongoing dialogue. So have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.